YouTube. This is Alpha White Wolf bringing you another video in the Dungeons & Dragons 101 series. A long time ago, when we actually did the first video of the series, or rather the first video of this particular character sheet, we talked about a fighter named Bob. We brought him all the way up. We established him as a level 1 human fighter from a noble background. We took care of detailing his attributes, the abilities and skills he possesses, languages known, and tool proficiencies, the equipment he has with him, his weapon abilities here, his armor class, initiative, speed, his personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, and special abilities granted by his class and background. So as of right now, we have a pretty decent build so far. So now we're just going to go ahead and take this to the next level, quite literally. So, in a moment you're going to hear the telltale sound of a dice falling. In this case, a nice sharp metal one that I favor quite heavily. I really love these things. So when I roll this dice in a moment to calculate the hit point boost that he's about to receive, you're going to hear the dice rolling, because I'm going to make this legit. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. So first off, let's go ahead and update this to level 2. So right off the bat, this brings us a few things that we need to take care of. First off, all hit points at higher levels, 1d10, or 6, plus the Constitution modifier. So if I wanted to be super simple, I could just get rid of this 12, add a 6 to it, and bring it up to 18. Now, as a dungeon master, this can be kind of up to you with how you do things. Your DM might decide to say you can roll for it, and if you don't like that roll, you can then go with the default increase. So for instance, I'm about to roll this d10, and I just rolled a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, I'm not going to take that roll. I'm going to go ahead and add the 6 plus the Constitution modifier. So in this case, that is 6 plus 2, so a total of plus 8. Brings it to a nice, solid 20 hit points. Alright, so this is actually pretty good. He's pretty tough, he's pretty tanky, but we also have a special ability that he gains as a response to being a level 2 fighter. As a level 2 fighter, he gains an ability. It's known as, let me go over here, Action Surge. Now, Action Surge is very simple. On one of your turns, you can take an additional action. So for instance, if you hit someone, you can hit them again. But in order to use this ability again, you need to take a short or long rest. So it's very useful if you really think you can finish off an enemy opponent, if you can finish off that one monster who's being stubborn. It can be very useful. Or alternatively, you could hit the enemy. They're not down. Okay, use Action Surge to bring out a health potion, down it, and regain some hit points for when they respond to you. Pretty much anything that's an action, Action Surge allows you to do. Now, if we just left it there, that would be pretty boring. So instead, we're going to go ahead and start talking about bringing it up to level 3 and beyond. Now, I'm going to be sticking with just the player's handbook here. More advanced stuff is contained within various other pieces of literature attached to Dungeons & Dragons. But this series is going to be talking about the bare bones, the basics, the very simple things that you can do and learn in order to do Dungeons & Dragons and do it reasonably well. So now we're going to go ahead and get on into level 3. Once again, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and roll our d10 and add in our new hit die. So that is a 7. 7 is higher than 6, so naturally I'm going to take that. 7 plus 2, 9. That brings it up to 29. Also, I might not have mentioned this in the previous episode, but the number of hit die you have is equal to your level. So if you have a level 3 character, you have 3 hit die. Multi-classing is something that we can address later when we actually get to that particular topic, but for right now, what's important is your level is also the number of hit die you have in your possession, and those are the number of hit die you can burn whenever you're trying to regain health points at a short rest. Alright, so level 3, we gain a number of choices available to us. Let's go ahead and see if there's a specific spot that we can do this. I don't believe there is, but I wanted to make sure. Alright. So I'm just going to stick it up here and put a slash mark. Now let's go ahead and talk about the 3 subclasses that are available from the player's handbook. The 3 subclasses are the Champion, the Battle Master, and then, finally, the Eldritch Knight. Now, the Champion is describable as being a somewhat smaller version of a Barbarian. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. So the Champion, at level 3, your attacks will score a critical hit on a 19 and 20. So let's go ahead and put that in there. Improved critical. So, for those of you who already know what a nat 20 does to your damage, you don't need to worry about this. For those of you who don't, what you need to know is that if you swing your sword at an enemy, you roll a 20-sided die, and you have to try and meet or exceed that target's armor class. If you do so, you successfully hit that person and you can start inflicting damage. A natural 20, if you roll that one side on that dice, you are guaranteed to hit that target, but not only hit them, but do double damage. The wording is sometimes a little tricky. To some DMs, it is simply roll twice as many dice. For some other DMs, it's a simple matter of whatever you roll, just double that damage. There are pros and cons to each one, and it's very situational. What you need to know, though, is that with the improved critical, you crit on 19 and 20. So instead of a 5% chance of doubling your damage and guaranteeing a hit, you now have a 10% chance of doing those things. A 1 in 10 versus a 1 in 20. Not a super big boost, but certainly valuable. Okay, so that's a level 3 champion. Let's go ahead and see about the others. Now, the champion, as I said, is basically a miniature barbarian. They are the fighter who hit the gym, lifted weights, and really concentrated on getting swole, you know? But on the exact opposite end of that spectrum, we have the Battle Master. Now, the Battle Master, they have something very interesting called Combat Superiority. Now, Combat Superiority gives a couple things. First off, it basically starts giving you these things called maneuvers. Now, maneuvers are interesting little things that you can do in order to boost your combat performance. And I'll get into some of the really noteworthy maneuvers in a moment. But what you need to know is that these maneuvers are also based upon superiority dice. Superiority dice utilize a d8, and you start off with 4 of them at level 3. You gain extra ones as you increase your levels in this subclass. Finally, some maneuvers have a saving throw that must be met or exceeded. So I'm going to go ahead. Wrong button. I'm going to go ahead and say, under here, under the combat superiority, I'm going to put the save DC. Save DC. So the save DC for your maneuvers is 8 plus the proficiency bonus plus the strength or dexterity modifier. Fortunately, both of those are the same. So we have 8 plus proficiency plus either of these. I'm going to go with strength because that's an easy one here. So 8 plus 2, that's a total of 12. All right. With that said, let's go ahead and start looking into other things that level 3 Battle Masters get available to them. They also gain an ability called Student of War. This is where they gain proficiency with an artisan tool set of their choice. Paintbrushes, drawing implements. These are very fanciful kinds of things, very, very artsy. I don't think that they're going to have significant places in a lot of campaigns, but for extensive campaigns, ones that last like months and maybe even years, they could certainly play a part in the characterization of this character. But for right now, let's get into something really interesting. Now I'm going to go ahead, before we get into the actual maneuvers, I'm just going to put 4d8. This represents the superiority dice. At level 3, he has 4 superiority dice, and each one is a d8. Okay? Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the interesting maneuvers. So there's quite a list of them, and they're able to choose 3 of them at level 3. So Battlemaster at level 3 can choose from a decent number of maneuvers. One that's actually really useful, especially if you can actually get it to pull off right, is the disarming attack. The disarming attack, and I'm going to read from the player's handbook verbatim. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to disarm the target, forcing it to drop 1 item of your choice that it's holding. You add the superiority dice to the attack's damage roll, and the target must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, it drops the object you choose, the object lands at its feet. So for the cost of 1 of these d8s, you can add in some extra damage. They have to try and meet or exceed a DC 12 strength check. And if they fail, you might be able to knock their weapon right out of their hands and to the ground. Meaning that on their turn, they have to expend an action just to pick up that weapon. And in most cases, that means that person will not be able to attack. This can be super useful. And remember, you get 3 of these maneuvers at level 3 and more as you increase your level in this subclass. Others, such as, oh, here's one, parry. When another creature damages you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction and expend 1 superiority dice to reduce the damage by the number you roll on the superiority dice plus your dexterity modifier. So what that means is, if someone attacks you with a sword, you can roll a d8 as a reaction and reduce the damage that is coming your way. So in that case, it could be anything from, let's see, at current level, dexterity +2. So you could reduce the damage at this current level at minimum 3 points. Doesn't sound like a lot, but at this level, 3 points is considerable. Or if you get really lucky with that dexterity addition, and you manage to roll a solid 8 on that d8, you can reduce that damage by 10. So it's a pretty broad range there. Now, with all that said and done, let's go ahead and get into one that I would personally advocate for any new Dungeons & Dragons player. Let me go ahead and erase this, because now we're getting into the Eldridge Knight. Alright, so if I had to describe the Eldridge Knight in the simplest terms, this is a fighter who sat down one day after becoming level 3 and deciding what he wanted to do, and he realized something that all of us realized very early in our lives. Magic is fucking dope. So he decided to borrow a wizard's spellbook and start studying. Now the thing about spellcasting for an Eldritch Knight, the spells chosen belong to a specific school sets. In this case, Evocation and Adjuration. Now this makes sense. This has a very practical feel to it, and fighters are very practical people. Evocation is your typical damaging spells. The most famous spell in all of Dungeons & Dragons, the infamous Firebolt, belongs to the Evocation school. So it makes sense that someone whose main focus in a fight is damaging the enemies is going to be very partial to damaging spells. Now Abjuration, on the other hand, this is magic that deals with shielding One of the most famous of them is the aptly named Shield spell, which you can use as a reaction to give a +5 armor class to a target of your choice. This is an impressive thing to have on your side. So you have a fighter who can not only launch fireballs and throw up magical wards, but you can also still use them to actually hit things, overcoming the main weakness of wizards, which we will talk about in one of the later videos. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the Eldridge Knight has available. So at level 3, they gain some spell casting. So let's go ahead and slide down to the magic. Spellcasting class. I'm going to put fighter / Eldritch Knight. Okay. Spellcasting ability. So the thing about the spellcasting ability for this is that it's much like the wizards in that it is intelligence. So INT. So the spell save DC. Let's look at the math here. That is 8 plus proficiency plus intelligence modifier. So 8 plus proficiency, that's 10. Plus intelligence, that's 11. Okay. That's not very high, but we can work with it. Spell attack bonus. This is the proficiency bonus plus the intelligence modifier, which means +3. So, in all fairness, it's only one below his melee attacks and ranged attacks. So his magical ability is only slightly less accurate than his physical abilities, which is useful. Now the Eldritch Knight in the player's handbook actually has an entire chart dedicated to what spells and cantrips they know. Now, I'm going to cover this in a bit more detail in the wizard video, but what you need to know about spells and cantrips, and magic in general when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, is cantrips are the small, simple spells. These are spells that are practiced so frequently that they're not even things that you really think about. Imagine for a moment a magical setting where people are so accustomed to lighting a little flame on the tip of a finger to light a cigarette that no one really considers it fancy magic anymore. That's kind of a cantrip. Furthermore, they also have specific spell slots. Spell slots are used in order to use specific levels of spells. So you need to have spell slots available of the correct level in order to use certain spells. So for instance, there's no place to actually put this, so I'm going to put it up here. And according to the chart, at level 3, the Eldridge Knight knows 2 cantrips. I'm going to abbreviate it to cant. And 3 spells. Alright. So he knows 2 cantrips and 3 spells. Alright, this is very, very good. We can work with this. At level 1, or level 1 spell slots at 3rd level, he has 2. So this means that he is capable of casting 2 level 1 spells before he needs to take a long rest. Once he takes a long rest, an 8-hour go down, take an actual night's sleep, he regains these spell slots and can cast magic again. Until that time, he cannot use magic in this sense. Cantrips he can use whenever he wants. There's no spell slot burning going on there. But for the actual level 1 spells, you need those spell slots, otherwise you're not going to be able to do those magics. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what else we got going here. I'll take a look at some specific spells in a moment, but for right now, we have more level 3 stuff to look at when it comes to the Eldritch Knight. First and foremost, something really, really cool. The weapon bond. Now the weapon bond works like this. You do a ritual to your weapon, so in this case, the longsword. And after this ritual of 1 hour, this weapon cannot be removed from you. You can't be disarmed unless you are incapacitated. Unless you are fully knocked out, you cannot have this weapon leave your possession. It will refuse to leave you. Furthermore, if you want to, you can hand this weapon off. You can hand the sword off to someone. So let's say, for instance, a very specific example. You need to infiltrate a fancy dinner party, but they're not going to allow you to carry weapons in there. Your level 3 Eldritch Knight just goes, okay, hands his sword off to the guard, who puts it in the arms room. Nothing too fanciful. Naturally, though, this is Dungeons and Dragons, so there's going to be some kind of weird conflict going on. The Eldritch Knight, because of the bond they have to their weapon, they can just hold their weapon out and their sword will teleport into their hand. Literally just teleporting and appearing in their hand. Now, at level 3, actually at all levels, you can have 2 bonded weapons. So in this case, our level 3 Eldridge Knight fighter named Bob could do this bond onto his longsword and his light crossbow. So he could have them teleport into his hand, no problem. But if he wanted to do this to a third, one of the other bonds must be broken. Furthermore, you can summon these weapons with a bonus action. So if Bob wanted to, he could run up to someone, seemingly empty-handed, and with a bonus action, summon his sword, and then with his actual action, take a swing. This is a lot to go on. This is a lot that this guy can do. Now, I'll go into greater detail on each of these subclasses at a later time. But for right now, let's go ahead and finish off with the Eldritch Knight and take a look at what kind of magic that they have access to. Now, as mentioned, the Eldritch Knight gains access to a couple spells. In this case, they have access to 2 cantrips and 3 regular level 1 spells. So let's go ahead and take a look at the wizard spells, because that's where the Eldritch Knight pulls their magic. Okay, so there's a couple ways we can go about this. First off, let's go ahead and talk about the cantrips. So let's face it, Evocation is definitely going to be something very, very useful. The fighter is going to benefit greatly from Firebolt, which, let me go ahead and get to the correct section in order to talk about this spell, because honestly, it is one of the most useful magic spells that you can have in the entirety of the game. So, Firebolt is an evocation cantrip. You use 1 action to cast it. It has a range of 120 feet. I'll cover distances a little bit more in detail at a later video, but for right now what you need to know is, on a Dungeons & Dragons map, each square on the map, each little tile that you would place your miniature on, represents 5 feet. This means that, let me go ahead and do this math real quick. This means that we're talking 24 squares. That is bigger than most maps that any dungeon master is bringing to a game. So you can literally shoot someone with this spell all the way across the map in most cases. Now the components are verbal and semantic. So you're either like saying Firebolt or you're making a hand gesture in order to cast it. In terms of its duration, it's instantaneous. It's basically like holding up a finger, saying Firebolt, and a bolt of flame shoots out of your fingertip. Now, this is where things get really interesting, and it's honestly insane. At its most basic, the Firebolt will do 1d10 fire damage. And if the object it hits is flammable, it catches fire. 2 things that make it really, really good. It's pretty decent damage, and it can light things on fire. Very useful. However, Like most damaging spells, its damage can increase. When you reach 5th level, it becomes 2d10, so anything from 2 to 20 points of damage. At 11th level, 3d10. At 17th, 4d10. And yes, there are people who will reach such heights of character power and will still use cantrips like Firebolt. It is just that valuable. Now, when looking at the other cantrips, there's quite a few that are useful. True Strike is one that's very useful. You can basically take one of your turns to point at an enemy, and you will gain advantage the next time you attack that enemy, which means that when you want to roll your d20 to attack, you roll 2d20, and you take the higher result. That can be very useful. Very, very useful, in fact. However, I'm going to say that the Eldridge Knight Bob is, again, super practical. He's not going to dedicate all of his spells to pure combat, so he's going to use Message. Now, Message is something that's very useful as well, because it's obviously a communication cantrip. Now, Message, let's go ahead and take a closer look at what we do here. This is a transmutation cantrip. One action, 120 feet, verbal, semantic, or material. And the material that you would use in order to cast Message is a short piece of copper wire. Lasts for 1 round. So, 1 round, everyone goes through the initiative order, and then you can do other things with this spell. So you point your finger at a creature within range, and you whisper a message. The target, and only the target, can hear the message, and then reply in a way that only you can hear. You can cast this through solid objects if you're familiar with the target. So, magical silence, a foot of stone, an inch of common metal, a thin sheet of lead, or 3 feet of wood will block the spell. Which, honestly, pretty impressive. Furthermore, the spell doesn't have to follow a straight line and can travel around corners and through openings. So as long as you have some kind of opening in any of those blocking materials that you can get this spell through and to the target in question, you can communicate with them. This is incredibly useful, and this is a cantrip. This is something that is so incredibly basic to use, and it is insane. Now what about some level 1 spells? So he knows 3, but he can only cast 2 per long rest. Sounds like a bit of a raw deal, but we can work with it. So, let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. So, first off, I mentioned earlier the shield cantrip, which I'm going to take a look at that one again and see if there's anything particularly interesting that needs to be addressed with that particular spell. So, shield, level 1 Adjuration. 1 reaction. And it actually has a specific thing when it comes to the magic missile spell, which I will take a closer look at as well, because that's also a really interesting thing. Like I thought, it is a +5 to your armor class or to an armor class of a target that you choose. Actually, it's just you. It's just you, actually. So, +5 bonus to your armor class. And honestly, this is where things get really cool. Magic Missile is blocked entirely. Like, if Magic Missile is coming at you, you can block this entirely with this spell. It is that useful. Now, on the topic of Magic Missile, that's one that's honestly another one that is pretty useful to take because of how variable you can make it. So, let's go ahead and take a look at Magic Missile. Magic Missile, let's see, 1 action, 120 feet, verbal, semantic, instantaneous. You create 3 darts of magical energy, and each dart deals 1d4 +1 force damage to the targets. They can you can direct these darts to either hit one target or up to 3 targets. So you get some choice there. Now, this also leads me into an important point that we can talk about using spells at higher levels. So let's go ahead and assume that our guy here takes Magic Missile. Okay, so he has Magic Missile. Let's say later on he gets a few level 2 spell slots. You can cast a level 1 spell at a level 2 slot. What that does is that it'll actually boost the power of that spell. Now, in case of Shield, nothing really can be done there. Shield is already doing everything it can. So it can't be increased to be more powerful with a level 2 slot. At that point, you might be able to do it if your DM allows it, but generally, even if he does, the DM is going to point out that it would be a waste of a level 2 slot. Now let's say you did cast Magic Missile at level 2 or higher. Each spell slot of level 2 or higher, you create an additional dart. So level 2, you would have 4 darts. At level 3, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. At some point, you're going to have a literal storm of magical bolts just attacking and barraging the enemy. And remember, each one of those darts is doing 1d4 plus 1 points of damage. So at bare minimum, 2 points of damage, and at max, 5 points. After a while, with enough of those slamming into you, that's going to be a pretty significant amount of damage. Okay, so what else does he have available to him? So we have Magic Missile, we have Shield. What else do we have? Now remember, we can only really choose spells from the Evocation and Adjuration branches. We can't really choose anything else. Let's go ahead and take a look at some others. Here's one, Adjuration. This is a touch-based spell, so you basically either touch yourself or touch an ally, and you give them an 8-hour boost to their armor class. Now, unfortunately, this only works if that target isn't wearing armor. So if they're wearing anything more substantial than cloth, this doesn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore that. It could be useful, but it really doesn't help. What else do we have? So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at 2 of these. We have Thunder Wave and Witch Bolt. So Thunder Wave. Let's go ahead and see what Thunder Wave has to offer, and after that we'll take a look at Witch Bolt. So we have, let's see, here it is, Thunder Wave. Evocation. It creates a 15-foot cube around yourself. It's instantaneous, it's verbal and semantic, and it takes 1 action. A thunderous force sweeps out from you, and anything that is within 15 feet of you must make a Constitution saving throw. So, they would need to roll an 11 or higher on a Constitution roll in order to not be affected by the following effect. On a failed save, the creature will take 2d8 thunder damage and is pushed 10 feet away from you. If they successfully save, they take half damage and aren't pushed. Furthermore, any unsecured objects that are completely within the area of the effect are automatically pushed 10 feet back. And the spell, it also will emit a thunderous boom audible out to 300 feet. At higher levels, if you use spell slot 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot above the first. So at level 2, it would be 3d8, 4d8, 5d8, 6d8, and so forth. Useful, but let's go ahead and take a look at Witch Bolt first, because frankly, Thunderous Wave sounds useful, it sounds interesting, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to have quite as much applicability here. So, let's take a look at the level 1 Evocation Witch Bolt. It takes 1 action to cast, range of 30 feet, verbal, semantic, or material. The material being a twig from a tree that has been struck by lightning. Ooh, now this is a concentration spell. So the way concentration spells work, you start casting them, and they'll have a specific duration, in this case up to 1 minute. In case you're wondering, that's roughly 10 battle rounds. So that's a pretty long battle. Now, when you're casting a concentration spell, the way it works is you cast the spell, and as long as you can hold that concentration, as long as you can keep that spell going, then you are able to keep on using that spell's effect, which can be super useful. However, if you take damage, you must make a Constitution saving throw of 10 or higher to maintain that spell, and if you fail, the spell ends. So let's go ahead and take a look. 1d12 lightning damage on a target of your choice, and on each of your turns for the duration, which again, 10 battle rounds, it'll deal an additional 1d12 lightning damage automatically. Now, if you use your action to do anything else, the spell ends. The spell will also end if the target is ever outside of your range or has total cover from you. And at higher levels, the spell will have an initial damage of 1d12 above its initial one. So, first turn you use it, 1d12 damage for a level 1 spell slot. Level 2 spell slot, it'll do 2d12 damage on its first turn, and then 1d12 for all the turns to follow. Then 3d12 on the first turn, 4d12, so on and so forth. And remember, 10 battle rounds, doing anything from 1 to 12 points of damage each turn that yours comes around. That is considerable, to say the least. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that Witch Bolt sounds good and all, but frankly, considering what the fighter will actually need to be doing, it will take him out of the fight in such a way that is just frankly not applicable. Okay. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and pick one that I know full well. We're going to go with a nice, simple one. A very basic evocation spell that frankly is, again, super useful. And to be honest, this is one of those spells that if you have access to, definitely go for it, because if you have the chance to get it, it's awesome. Burning Hands. So I'm going to go ahead and put that. Alright, here's the basic gist of it. A 15-foot cone of fire that takes 1 action and is instantaneous. Each creature in that cone must make a dexterity saving throw, so again, 11 or higher. And if they fail, they'll take 3d6 fire damage, and half as much if they succeed. And it also ignites flammable objects. At higher level spell slots, you will add 1d6 for each spell slot level. So this is 3d6, 4d6, 5d6, 6d6, 76, all the way up. That is, oh boy, that is some decent amount of damage. Now, with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it here like this for right now, and then pick up on this with a deeper explanation into the Eldritch Knight, as well as continuing on with the fighter itself. So, if you've enjoyed this video, please indicate so down below. If you like the videos to continue, please comment down below, and if you have suggestions for future videos, do so as well. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, because we are slowly but surely inching our way towards that 1,000 subscriber count. And once we get there, that's going to be an awesome situation for me and Reaper to celebrate over. Furthermore, the more subscribers we have, the more motivation I have to continue bringing out videos like this. So if you do like this kind of content, then subscribe and show me that. because that is going to be what really helps me make the decision to make this kind of stuff more frequently. But with all that said, I've been Alpha White Wolf. I'm signing off. You keep howling, Wolfpack.